Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Okay, so we are on verse 7 today. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. What is mercy? There are two important terms in Christian faith: grace and mercy. Grace is receiving something that we don't deserve, and mercy is not receiving something that we deserve. So I oftentimes utilize these examples, and I'm going to actually repeat that in this class for those of you who are taking it for the first time. So there was one time, so I'm going to just describe grace first. What is grace? Receiving something that we do not deserve. When I was going to a seminary, I really enjoyed taking people out and just treating them with lunch or dinner. And there was a missionary who is very good-hearted, so devoted to God, and I wanted to honor her, so I took her to the school cafeteria. And we lined up. We were just, because this is an important person, I just chatted on the way, you know, and we picked up our food, and we were so, we were enjoying our conversations. Now, it was time for me to actually pay for the 2 meals, mine and hers. I realized that I didn't bring my wallet. I was like, whoa, what happened? What did I do? And because we picked up the food and there was limited lunch hour, and I could not run back and grab my wallet from home, or so I said, oh, what am I supposed to do? And she also did not have any money on her, and so we're in big quandary. Now there was a gentleman that I did not know at all, stood a few people down the line, and he just watched us. I guess he was carefully watching us, and he said, here's some money. Okay, so that should cover it. At that time, the cafeteria food was relatively inexpensive, so he put some cash down, and then we were taken care of. And I just said, thank you so much, thank you. And we went down to enjoy the food, and this gentleman basically disappeared, and I do not know who he is. I should have asked his name, right? But I was so perplexed. I didn't even get to ask his name. That's called grace. So receiving something that we don't deserve. Like I have no personal relationship with him, and he has no reason to give his money to pay for our meals, right? So receiving something that we do not deserve, that's grace. But God's grace is at a much, 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 much bigger scale, larger scale. Yeah, because it's not just paying for our meals, but He paid for the penalty of our sins, so that not only we can enjoy one meal with one guest, but we can enjoy the banquet in heaven. Now, mercy is not receiving what we deserve. So I also utilize this example a lot, which is kind of embarrassing. So there was one time, once again, I have some missionary friends, and this older couple, they had really, really challenging time in the mission field, and they just came back in for their sabbatical, I believe. And I wanted to, it was not even sabbatical, I would say sabbatical month or sabbatical weeks. And they were there for just a short period of time. And I wanted to treat them nicely. But then that day I was really tired, and I didn't know the directions very well. And especially at that time, I was so not used to talking and driving at the same time. And so the missionary couple, the husband actually drove his own car, and his wife actually kindly offered to ride with me because she wanted to utilize that time even to talk to each other. And so we enjoyed our conversations, and while we were talking, I was so distracted. So I guess and I didn't know the directions very well. She knew the direction. She knew which restaurant she wanted to go. And so she said, I think it's left. So I turned the left signal. So we came into the parking area of a shopping center, and we wanted to actually go out into the road to go to a different restaurant. Now she said, I think it's left. So I turned the left signal on, and then she said, oh, it might be right actually. So with the signal on toward the left, I turned to the right, and there was a cop that followed me. Stop your car on the right, and he came, and as I rolled down the window, yes sir, what did I do? And he said, are you okay? So I said, I'm okay. And he said, okay, first of all, you look really confused. You turned your left signal on, but you turned to right. And by the way, you don't have your sticker on yet. Like the sticker is expired. What is going on? Give me your driver's license. So like my heart just beat really hard. He said, and where's your insurance? So then I remembered, because I was in the midst of moving at that time. For some reason, my insurance, the old insurance copy was in there, but then updated insurance copy was not there. So, which is a big trouble, right? So I gave it to him saying, it is updated, it's just that I don't have the paper with me. And then so he looked at me really suspiciously, and then he actually started calling just to check if what I said was true. And actually he found out that what I said was true. So then he actually let me go. So he said, I'll give you a ticket, but there's actually very, very small amount of fine. Yeah, but I'll let you go. And but the ticket did not say a certain amount. It did not have a date, but it just had a warning on it. And so, in the midst of that, okay, one thing that I forgot to share is he said driver's license. My driver's license was in my trunk, in my bag. And I said, it's in my bag in the trunk. Can I take it out, please? And the officer looked at me suspiciously one more time. And he said, okay, go ahead. And when I actually got out, I didn't realize that back then, but then the missionary, the husband, actually was watching this whole thing going on. He parked behind us, and he was watching this whole thing. Later on, he told me, you know what, when you were searching for your bag in your trunk, the police officer actually checked his ammunition, like basically his gun, just in case I would bring something out of my trunk and shoot him or something like that. Thanks to the missionary watching, I felt safer, and then this officer actually checked everything, and then he let me go. Later I found out that the ticket was not worth anything, so there was nothing that I had to do. And so then of course, and then the sticker, I told him I actually have the sticker, but I'm in the process of moving, so it's in my box and I have to dig it through. But I actually updated, the sticker. I just have to find it and then stick it on there. And so he just put a few warnings there, and then he let me go. So, of course, so that is mercy. So not receiving maybe the ticket with certain amount, he just let me go. That's called mercy, right? But God's mercy is even greater than that, because we not only violated just traffic laws or certain laws, but we violated the entire laws of God. Meaning, because when we violate just a little bit, we violated the entire thing. We're no longer good citizens of the kingdom. And we definitely fell short of his standard in every direction. And not only by the fall of Adam and Eve, but even while we are living, we are prone to sin in our actions or our thoughts. And so then, and the way we relate to each other and things like that. And so we really need to ask God for mercy every day. But however, he knew that we would be imperfect, that we would fall short at all times. So he had to come up with a solution called Jesus Christ. So God poured all his wrath upon Jesus Christ so that he would take away all the wrath and all the punishment upon himself, and then set us free from the prison or the punishment. That mercy cannot be compared with anyone's mercy, right? Mercy can be so great. My example is a small example, but there can be examples of much greater mercy. But God's mercy cannot be compared with any other kinds of mercy, because he gave himself for us. While we were still sinners, he gave himself for us. And so we may lay down our lives for righteous people, but that's even rare, right? But who wants to die for unrighteous people? That's beyond our understanding. Why did God do that? What a waste. How foolish. So the good news of Christ is foolishness to those who are perishing, but it's the saving power of God to those who are being saved. Yeah, it's mighty power. It's unfathomable love and mercy that God is showing us, so that we would do the same for other people. And here it says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." So I'm reminded of Mulan. Mulan is it came out a long time ago, the animated version. The real person version was about to be released in March this year, but then COVID-19 lockdown happened and it was never released in the theaters. There, this general, is his name Shang Li, right, if I remember correctly, and Mulan disguises herself as a man in order to go to the army in place of her dad, who has physical difficulties. He can't even hold a sword, right? And so she disguises herself, and she has difficulty adjusting to this military life that is designed for men. She goes through so many hardships, but in the end, she acquires perseverance, tenacity, and wisdom, and so she ends up saving General Shang Li's life. Now, afterwards, she was wounded and she was found to be a woman. At that time, it was forbidden for a woman to speak in presence of men in China, and it was forbidden for a woman to join the army or to be mixed with men, right? And so Shang Li actually takes out his sword about to, slaughter her. Now he remembers, okay, you saved my life, and so this is a payback, and he drops his sword before her, so her life is spared. This is not a good example of mercy, because it's a payback of some sort, but he could have still, he had still the authority and power to, and good reason to actually kill her, but then he lets her go. And in that aspect, that's mercy. Yeah. although Shanli was not very friendly toward her, and this picture is a little bit blurry because she actually started liking him a little bit, and probably that motivated her to save him. But then, she risked her life in order to save his life, right? Even twice, right? Even twice. And so then she was merciful. She was merciful toward him, and at the risk of her own life. And so in the end, she's returned with mercy. So that might be a little example of this verse. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall see mercy. They shall receive mercy, right? And so it's not always like a payback. Blessing flows down. Blessings flow down. God blesses us not to receive anything in return. We cannot return his blessings anyways. And when we receive from him, we're empowered to bless other people. Even during COVID-19 lockdown, and when certain resources were scarce, God blessed me with certain materials that were kind of critical at that time. And I was able to share that with my neighbors, with my friends and family. And so blessings are abundantly given to us so that we can bless other people. It becomes a joy to us, and to those who are receiving, it becomes joy. And also, it is an opportunity to experience God's blessings through other people. We're called to be a channel of blessings for other people. And so when we receive something, then we can actually let it flow down. Instead of trying to pay back, it would be helpful for his kingdom if we actually open up ourselves to a bigger crowd and actually bless them what we have received. So those people who are merciful, they're blessed because they shall receive mercy. Now, let's go back to talk about brain development. And so on page 25, brain development and health. The early years of a child's life are very important for later health and development. Yeah. One of the main reasons is how fast the brain grows starting before birth. Yeah, brain starts forming in mother's womb, right? And continuing into early childhood. I would say brain continues to develop in later life. So the size and certain functions develop to a certain age. I believe beyond childhood. I believe beyond childhood. There are new research results that are coming out, even about language acquisition, that you can acquire a language at a later age than 7. Before, when I was growing up, when I went to college, I took some anthropology and psychology classes, and the research evidences back then showed that you have to acquire a different language by the age of 7 in order to become bilingual and things like that. Otherwise, you're going to be largely monolingual and things like that. You're going to be limited. But there are those people who are around me, and there are more and more research studies are finding out that you can actually acquire a different language at a later age. So for those people who are speaking English as a second language, and English is a second language to me as well, and you can take hope because at a later age you can still become bilingual of some sort. Not perfectly, and there is actually no such a thing as a perfect bilingual, but you can acquire a language to be able to communicate at a certain level. For example, at an academic level, at a higher level than just conversational, and you can actually communicate your ideas eloquently in a different different language even if you acquire it at an older age than 7. Definitely older age than 7. Now, brain grows and stops at certain age, at least by early 20s, right? But then the brain still needs to be taken care of even afterwards. So like I'm trying to play a devil's advocate to the theory that is being presented, although there's a truth in it. If you're addicted to something, it could be alcohol, it could be shopping, it could be gambling, it could be drugs, it could be games, it could be pornography, it could be anything, right? Those people who are addicted to some kind of substance or some kind of thing tend to have similar symptoms manifested through their brain. So if you actually scan their brains and compare with normal brains, then you can see that those people who are addicted have smaller brains, like their brains have actually shrunk. And they can have certain like holes in their brains, not because their brains were physically damaged, but because they were so focused on limited types of brain intake and certain types of processing only, and they're largely lacking social interactions. And because social interactions give you opportunities for your brains to develop as well. It's really interesting. So play and social interactions are very important. And these people who are addicted, or those people, senior people who are isolated, have no visitors and things like that, they also experience brain damage of some sort. For example, some people develop dementia at an earlier age if they have no social interactions. Isn't it interesting? We're created as social beings, and social interactions actually stimulate your brains enough so that your brains will work better and will become more creative. But these people who are addicted don't withdraw themselves from social interactions. That's one typical aspect of people who are addicted, one symptom. And they're just focused on doing whatever. I'm doing this to represent games, but they're just focused on one thing, and their brains over time loses certain functions. So different parts of your brains have different functions, and if you don't use them, use it or lose it, right? So then they become obsolete, I guess, and they start losing the tissues, I guess. And so then overall brain shrinks, and therefore their intellectual capacity even is limited. However, stresses do the same thing. Not the same thing, but have similar effects, and so stresses can be very dangerous for your health and also brain development. All right, we're still on page 25 if you want to follow along. How well a brain develops depends on many factors in addition to genes. So genetic effects you cannot really rule out. There are people who are so overcoming. There are many overcomers around my circle of friends. They're definitely overcomers. But there are certainly genetic factors, right? So if your parents had diabetes, then you have a higher chance of getting it. If your parents had high blood pressure, probably you're gonna develop it towards a certain age, unless you withdraw yourself from certain style of diet, certain lifestyle. And especially if you don't work out, then it's going to be like a really bad combination. So when you go to a clinic, the doctors always ask you, okay, did your father's side of the family or mother's side of this family, did anybody have this list of things? did your cousins or relatives who are further away by degrees have any of these symptoms, any of these illnesses, right? And so they are trying to check your genetic background, right? So genes are very important even when it comes to brains. So so simply put, if you have smart parents, then you have a much better chance of being born as a smart child. If you were born into a not very smart family, it could be by education, it could be by genetic factors, but if, given that there are some genetic factors that are involved, right, and not so smartness, then you're gonna probably inherit that. But by practice, you can overcome. And even at a later age, changes come. Just like these people who are addicted can develop certain symptoms and their brains are affected at a later age, right? Just like that, you can actually continue to utilize your brains, and actually you can have bigger capacity. Research studies have been done, but you know what? It's only so limited. And so we're gonna have more new discoveries in the future about brains, and it's amazing what God can do, even through our lifestyle and our practices and habits, even through prayers. And so think of those factors while I'm talking about this. So proper nutrition starting in pregnancy. Yeah. So an example. Okay, so I have lots of friends, right? I had this friend, couple. They had 3 children. So when the woman's side, she was pregnant with the 3rd child, they really did not have much. They had financial constraints, and so they were not eating well. And so the baby came out to be so small. And so I was pretty much doing childcare while this event was going on. So or someone else was doing childcare, and I just needed to go around and kind of watch a little bit. And this child was such distracted and hyperactive and restless. He was just restless. Wow, I could not imagine, wow, this child is not gonna grow if he is so hyperactive 24/7. Yeah, he cannot sit still. Definitely there was something wrong with him. And his parents and his older siblings were completely fine, and there was no family history of ADHD or other types of psychological issues. But this child, because he was so malnourished, he came out a little bit different, with certain issues. And so it's very important for you to adequately nourish your child even from pregnancy. And sometimes you don't realize that you're pregnant, right? So then it's important for you to actually take good care of yourself even from the beginning of your married life, because you don't know when it's going to happen, right? Exposure to toxins or infections. So and medications and to anything. So when the mother is pregnant and she smokes or drinks, or if she is on drugs, I've met some unfortunate clients in my therapy sessions who actually were born while their parents were doing drugs. But you know what? Amazing. They seem to be doing relatively fine. They did not have significant problems. Yeah, there were really fortunate cases. But then I've also seen examples, on TV, and you probably have as well. There was one child who was born while his mom was on drugs. And so the child was born kind of with certain debilitations. He was singing worship songs, but he could not stand still. He had to jump around a little bit. I think he was autistic. Autism, we have not figured out exactly what the causes are, right? Some people say stress, other people say genetic, other people say, drugs, or other people say harmful electronic rays, and but we have not really found out like what the real cause is, right? There could be like correlations, but then we haven't found out what the causes are, right? And this child was autistic, but he was able to sing songs, right? So it's important that expectant moms, if you have a possibility, and it's an issue because there are so many cases of teenage pregnancy, unexpected pregnancy, and unwanted pregnancy. And so then when a baby's in the mother's womb, he or she is not taken adequate care of, right? Then when the child is born, it's going to be really hard on the parents and of course on the child. And the third element is very important, the child's experiences with other people and the world. In other words, even emotional development, we talked about attachment a couple of sessions ago, right? And how they're attached, if they feel secure and safe, or if they feel that they're not taken care of, the world is not a safe place, then it affects their brain development as well. Wow, we did not know this like probably some 50 years ago or 70 years ago, right? Nurturing and responsive care for the child's body and mind. Wow. So even for the brain development, if you are in an abusive environment, your brain will not develop properly. So say, for example, you are given child A and child B the same adequate food. Nutrition-wise, there's nothing lacking. But then, if you demonstrate love and care, so otherwise emotional care for this child B, child A was largely abused, although it was given good food, then there's going to be major difference between these two children in terms of physical health, but also brain development. Isn't that incredible? So it's not like putting fuel into your car. So if you put good fuel in your car, then your car is gonna, you can drive it for so long, and as long as you put good fuel, then it's going to last long, right? The child is not like a vehicle. A child needs adequate emotional care and social interactions. The child needs to feel that he or she is secure, or that human beings around them, especially adults, are safe. Otherwise, their brains are not developing as well. They don't have that much creativity. They don't have, even academically, it's hard for. So, for example, I'm not making this up. So research studies have found that those children with parents who are in the process of divorce, the parents might have hit the process, so the child may not consciously aware of the fact that their parents are actually getting a divorce, or they have some significant issues. Yeah. So it could be de facto divorce, it could be legal divorce, right? The children, for some reason, they spiritually sense it, I guess with their sixth sense, and somehow, without them consciously understanding or knowing, their grades drop. They suffer academically. Yeah. And they tend to show a little bit of psychological issues. It might not be as significant as like schizophrenia or anything like that, but they tend to demonstrate restlessness, agitation, or sleeplessness, or misbehaviors, behavioral problems. Behavioral problems develop a lot, especially when the children are young. Isn't it interesting? that they may not even know that their parents have problems, but they just sense it. And then it affects their academics, it affects their peer relationships, it affects their brain development. Yeah. So to nurture the child's body and mind, parents and caregivers need support and the right resources. Yeah. So in the past, in our probably grandparents' generations or great-grandparents' generation, they were surrounded by more stable community. So they tended to live in one place for a long time, like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and they developed some trust relationships with their neighbors. They knew each other, and so they knew who were good families and not so safe families and things like that. So then they had ways to take care, like they knew each other's children, and they would show some support. And even for babysitting, like, oh, okay, oh, you're going away somewhere, like you can actually leave your children with me and I'll take good care of them, and I'll do the same thing, like when I go away, like I will let you babysit my children. And so that was kind of common, and everyone knew each other even ever since they were little. In that case, the community actually raises the children together to some degree. But as urbanization and industrialization happen, there's more sense of anonymity. You don't know your neighbors anymore, and you don't know if your neighbors are going to take good care of your children or if they're safe to your children. Like you have to kind of watch out. Then your resources are limited, and so then it's harder. Like very much the childcare is like on your own. Like you're on your own. Right, so the burden is heavier on the couple. Then, we need to have like other kinds of support and resources, right? So more and more, the government agencies and other kinds of public help became more available in order to step in, right? So utilize community centers, different seminars, parents groups, support groups, and try to actually utilize those resources. If you have close friends who are still living in close vicinity, then you can exchange information and even childcare or even toys. You can share toys. Don't recommend that during COVID, but without COVID, it is actually encouraged for you to share resources. But now it has isolated us even further, right? Because we don't have access to the same resources that we used to have. But still, even online, and there are certain things that you can do still together. Given that you utilize safety measures and sanitary measures. Childhood experiences for brain development. So we are going on to Roman numeral 2. Children are born ready to learn, and they have many skills to learn over many years. Children depend on parents and family members and other caregivers as their first teachers to develop the right skills. So yeah, the immediate family and child caregivers are very important. So once again, I had a friend who had a child, and she was working full-time, so she had to actually have a child caregiver, and she was a relatively older lady, and she had a certain way of walking. She has certain style of walking, and so her child was a boy, and he was at that age where he started to walk, around 12 months of age. And so after like 18 months old, she started to notice, oh, he walks like the old child caregiver, she's female, and he's imitating, like he's walking like her. And so she had to kind of, like, she was really frustrated, actually. She was worried. That's not how you walk as a little boy, you know. That's how a senior female would walk. And so it's interesting when you spend extended amount of time with certain people, then you start imitating them. Well, the child is largely not aware that he or she is doing that. How the brain grows is strongly affected by the child's experiences with other people and the world. Nurturing care for the mind is critical for brain growth. Yeah, so you have to nurture not just the emotions, but the mind, right? Intellect. Children grow and learn best in a safe environment where they're protected from neglect and from extreme or chronic stress with plenty of opportunities to play and explore. So neglect is not good. Like, you can do whatever you want to do and I'm not going to just teach you anything. That's really not helpful. But also, some of the parents are, especially with the first child, like, they're trying so hard, you know, like, oh, this is my child. I'm going to teach him. He's going to be a genius. Or my daughter, you know, like, oh, I'm going to teach her like so many skills. And so there's so much hands-on, but in a negative way. They're so domineering, and they present things before the child is ready. You don't allow the space to explore and kind of enjoy, but you become kind of a stressor. I've seen those people who are overly eager and they tend to kind of dominate the scene. The child does not develop that much creativity because the child is either bombarded with so much information or intervention, or the child is not given the opportunity to exercise their own creativity, but rather is told to do certain things, or told to do a certain way, told to eat certain way, told to, like, very much they're just bombarded with commands and instructions. So that's something that we want to avoid. How parents and caregivers can help. Yeah. We need to speak to them, not in a domineering way, but we have to carefully listen to their needs. I think before we speak, we need to listen. That's something that we might be lacking as a society, because we're living in a highly verbal society, believe it or not. And I'm talking a lot right now, as I'm supposed to. But if I have students like in the class, I tend to listen to them carefully, to their needs. If they understand, I give them opportunities for discussions, because that's when feedback is available, right? And so then it's very important to listen to a child. A child is born with creativity, ready to learn, and they have the energy, they have the capacity to observe and learn and grow and develop. And so you have to trust that they have the potential already. And you just need to present a little bit of opportunities, a little bit of stimulation, but then pretty much let them be and carefully watch. Intervene only if it's necessary. I mean, that's my understanding. That's my, and it's hard because it's your own child. You want the best for your child. You want them to start reading at the age of 2. Sometimes you want the approval and compliments from other people. Oh, you did such a good job raising your child. Oh, your child is so well behaved. Or your child is so smart, and things like that. You want to hear those comments, and therefore you're driving them. Like, okay, perform. But while there's such a demand for performance, the child will not do so well. But then on the other hand, there are also families I've seen, this is just my personal observation, they're like, oh, you don't have to do it, no, nothing challenging, oh, you don't have to do this, you don't have to like stand before other people and say anything, you don't have to sing, like, okay, so there are certain moments when the child is largely shy, or the child is not ready for some reason, and in that case, you don't want to force them. But then on the other hand, there are parents who actually don't want any kind of suffering and any kind of challenge for their children. Oh, you don't have to do that. Oh, don't worry, you can drop it. if you do that all the time, then also there's a chance that this child does not turn out to be resilient or does not learn to demonstrate his or her skills and knowledge, which can be important, as the child goes to school, right? So there's a fine balance, and it's hard to keep the fine balance because you're so attached to the child, right? It's your own child, or you're invested in them. Like I don't have my own child yet, but then I've had students and disciples, and it was kind of hard to find the balance. But my approach is a little more hands-off. Like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna just watch them, and I'm gonna make certain comments. If they go do something seriously morally wrong, then yes, I have to intervene. So I was invited as a kind of like a visitor slash aide, to preschooler and kindergarten's ministry. And so I just sat there and just played with them, just to be like presence, adult presence for them. And I noticed that there were two 4-year-olds. One was 3.5. The other was 4 years old. The 4-year-old was much bigger, and she, it was both two girls, but then she had much more physical power, and she noticed that. And she did not like the youngest child, 3.5, because she was receiving a lot of attention and compliments from other people. So whenever she is around, she would kind of push her, like not noticeably. At first I was like, oh, why did she fall? And she did not know how to complain. So she went away, and then she would just continue to play. And then later on, as time passed, as I spent 2 hours with them, I was like, that's what she's doing. So the bigger child's name, I'm not gonna reveal, say Betsy. Betsy, that's not nice. You just ask her, can I play with you? Or you just ask her, can I play, please share the toys with you. You don't go and push other people. And she had this kind of guilty, but kind of not a very innocent smile on her face and laughter. And I had to carefully intervene. So in those cases, you have to intervene, and you have to tell them, that's not right. That's not nice for you to push people around, right? And then the 3.5-year-old, she noticed that my presence was a little bit helpful to her for safety. And so then she started to play a little more with a little more energy, and I could see that she has become a little more because play has become a little more enjoyable with this girl under a little bit of intervention and control, right? And so she started to play a little more joyfully then. So yeah, if you have siblings who are experiencing sibling rivalry, or if there's anything going on in child care center or kindergarten and things like that, there has to be an intervention for those cases. But then other times you try to kind of naturally let them interact in a more natural setting rather than intervening. So parents and caregivers can help by speaking to, playing with, and caring for the child. Parents can take turns when talking and playing and building on the child's skills and interests. So like this child is already doing something like building a Lego. Then you can say, oh, that looks like a castle. What is it? What is it that you're building? It's not a castle. I'm building, walls or something like that. I'm building an apartment. Oh, is that right? Okay. So you start communicating. You start throwing some questions like, okay, so are these windows? Like, what are these? Wow, what kind of apartment is it? How many people do you live there? Things like that. You can just create some questions, and then not too many, but show interest. Oh, somebody's interested in my work. I'm getting attention. Then they get more motivated, and they learn to take turns in conversations. They learn to take turns. Okay, so I put one in here. Mommy, you go and use this block. it's your turn, or it could be a game that requires taking turns. The child learns to pick up the cues. The child actually learns to take turns. That's an important skill. I've dealt with some autistic children, and it is a major difficulty for them to actually learn how to take turns, in conversations or in play. It's just very much of a challenge. And so if you can actually teach them at an early age, that's something that should be intervened. Like if your child is not demonstrating taking turns or has major difficulty sharing, then it's going to present a larger problem when the child goes to school or goes to a public setting. And even in later life, if you don't properly learn that, then it becomes a major challenge for the child. And so you want to actually present those opportunities at an early age. And then also parents and caregivers can help by speaking with children and exposing them to books, stories, and songs. Yeah, to help them strengthen the children's language and communication. Yeah, so the parents can be creative, but then also you present them with good books. I mean, you want to actually read the books beforehand so that you know what the content is. And then if you think it's adequate, then present that to the children and carefully kind of watch them. Like, does my child prefer books with pictures of nature, like birds and trees, or does my child like sci-fi? Does my child like princess stories, or does my child like some historical events? What do they like? What is their preference? And so you want to not just feed them with what they prefer, but start from that point and then kind of gradually expand the categories of interest. Exposure to stress and trauma can have long-term negative consequences for a child's brain. Yeah, once again, so brain responds in interesting ways, and they're surprisingly very recoverable. So this is on a different note. This is not about stress and trauma, but just to demonstrate the fact that brain can be damaged at a later age, but then so recoverable as well. I had a friend, and he was an ex-addict. So I think he was exposed to drugs, and he openly talked about that before us. And because he thought of us as safe, so he shared his stories, and so like he did not have a good memory anymore. He said, "Oh, I used to have drugs. Like now, my memory is not working," and he couldn't do simple math. So we had to go on a trip as a church, and he actually asked me to buy like group flight tickets. It was not individual process, but as a group, we needed to buy flight tickets, and he told me to go to a bank and withdraw a certain amount of, like, it's a long time ago, so we didn't have like credit cards and things like that. I'm not talking about the availability, but he didn't have a credit card. He only had a debit card, and so he gave me the debit card, saying that so we collected all the fees, flight fare from everyone. He had apparently put it into his bank account. He said, okay, a certain amount of money you have to withdraw, and then why don't you go to the flight agency and then actually purchase tickets at a discounted rate, because I had access to discounted rate, and so I went, and then he was calculating how many people have submitted their fares and how much was in total, and that's simple addition. He had difficulty, he struggled with it, and he said, "Oh, Joanne, can you please do it for me?" I was like, "Really? You can't do math?" And because he was already, I think it was like 25, he said, "You know what? I still do drugs. I think it damaged my brain." I was like, "Whoa, okay." And so I did the math for him. So not much was damaged, but then afterwards, I saw that he had to do certain things, tackle certain things. And then he started to gradually recover. I've seen another friend who actually was addicted to drug, but then he actually dropped it instantaneously once he accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior. He just dropped the habit. He became clean, right? And he was drug free for 2 years, 1 year, 2 years when I met him. And he said it was not difficult at all to just drop it when you realize that Jesus loves you and this drug cannot satisfy me, but Jesus is my ultimate satisfaction. And when I am so loved by God, and when I understand that, it was so easy for me to let it go, which does not make sense clinically, right? But he just dropped it immediately, and his brain was working fine after 1 or 2 years. No major problems. Yeah, it's really amazing how God designed us so that our bodies and brains can be recoverable. So then exposure to stress and trauma can be damaging, but then it's also recoverable. Yeah. So spend some time with your children, engage with them by talking, listening, making comments, just by encouraging them. A healthy diet and the right nutrients like sufficient folic acid will promote a healthy pregnancy and a healthy nervous system in the growing baby. Yeah. Vaccinations can protect pregnant women from infections that can harm the brain of the unborn baby. Yeah. So you want to actually take care of yourself before you're conceived, or if there is a chance for you to be conceived, then you want to take good care of yourself. And then while you're pregnant, you want to, but then I also want to present the other aspect. I like this, playing the other side of the aspect. Some people say that it's such a stress to check every single thing, like if I'm doing right or wrong, if I'm taking right nutrition, adequate amount. Checking that is so much a stress that I'm not enjoying this. This is not fun. This is so draining. In that case, I think it's better for you to just live naturally, stress-free. That's probably better for your child and child's brain, right? And so there's always a fine balance. You can do the checklist and you can kind of check, but then ultimately the most important thing is you have a loving, supportive relationship with your spouse, and you receive adequate nurture from other people, and then you try to kind of check initially, and maybe with your physician but you can actually download so much information from websites now. They give you checklists what you're eating daily, and then they can actually help you calculate your calories and certain nutrients that you're taking and how much. By that you can kind of see, oh, this is like excess. Oh, I'm seriously lacking in this area. Oh, you know what? I gotta change my diet. Then you adjust your diet to a certain degree, but you don't have to be nitty gritty and try to perfect with everything. While you're doing that, probably it's gonna be miserable for you and your baby. And so just feel free, but then try to provide adequate nutrition for yourself and your child for brain development. So having said that, let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for giving us abundant food to eat. Even during this COVID-19 situation, you are giving us things to eat and something to put on the table. And thank you for giving us creativity so that we can be creative in terms of creating certain menus and feeding our family, Lord. Lord, we remember these families who do not have enough to eat. Father God, we ask you that you will send them helpers and helping agencies, and help us be more aware of those people who are around us, or who are in need, so that we can reach out and help. Lord, we thank you for all the good food that you're giving us, and give us the mind to be able to nourish ourselves and our children properly, Lord God, so then they will grow up to be healthy and they'll be thriving. They'll contribute to the society.